So many first moments to remember with children, their first step, their first word. But tonight, a different kind of first. A little boy about to hear his dad's voice for the first time.
This is the moment so many people are talking about. Grayson Clamp, 3 years old. He had never heard his father before.
Talk to him, Daddy.
Daddy loves you. Daddy loves you.
Grayson points his finger there, hearing sound for the first time ever.
Can you hear Daddy?
Here.
Daddy loves you.
Grayson was born without nerves in either of his ears. Watch as his father tries to talk with his little boy, who in this moment has turned back to his book.
Show me puppy.
And little Grayson points to the puppy on that book. As the moment unfolds, Dad simply asks his little boy a question.
You hear Daddy? Yes?
Everyone in the room recognizing it's almost too much for this little boy to comprehend at first. It's now been a month, though, since that moment, and Grayson's mother tonight telling us she remembers it like it just happened.
A mix of overwhelming joy, relief, excitement.
Without those nerves in his ears, a cochlear implant at 18 months old didn't work. So here's what doctors did instead. An experimental procedure, complex brain surgery. So rare, he's the first child to have it in the U.S. Bypassing the ears altogether, surgeons inserted a tiny microchip directly onto the brain's sound processing center, right there in the brainstem, to stimulate hearing, skipping the ears and going straight for the brain. The operation took 8 hours. 4 weeks he would spend in the hospital sleeping with that teddy bear. Grayson's mother telling us her son transformed.
He's more aware of what's going on around him.
Both parents knowing the first words he heard, Daddy loves you.
Daddy loves you.
What you just watched was one of hundreds of thousands of real-life instances of the miracle of modern technology giving someone the opportunity to improve their life forever. Every single day, someone living with hearing loss finds their life instantly changed the moment they're able to receive treatment in the form of hearing aids, cochlear implants, as well as many other ways. These changes have and will forever improve so many lives, just like how it improved my own. My name is James, and I'm a 21-year-old American college student, and I've lived most of my life with hearing loss in both ears. About 2 years ago, I was blessed with the opportunity to treat my hearing loss through hearing aids. While it did take me some time to decide, this decision forever changed my life, and I honestly can't believe I didn't try getting them sooner. Now, I want to welcome you, yes, you, to the first of hopefully many more YouTube videos on my brand new channel, I'm All Ears. Whether you're a friend, family member, or a complete stranger, I first just want to say thank you for deciding to click on this video and give up what I understand to be your valuable time and showing your support. This video is really the start of a passion project that I've been planning for a while now, where I want to be able to take a deep dive into the world of hearing and help create a new kind of awareness towards hearing loss disabilities, the effect that it can and has had on people, as well as what so many amazing people are doing right now to continue improving the lives of individuals with hearing loss. With nearly 20% of the world living with some kind of hearing loss, and 430 million of them having disabling hearing loss, this is a very real and very major issue that has greater consequences than many are honestly aware of. In youths with hearing loss alone, this group is 5.5 times more likely to have attempted suicide and twice as likely to become addicted to drugs or alcohol. This is why I've decided to create this channel. I want to contribute to this conversation focused around hearing loss and help promote the education and overall success of hearing technology that will hopefully continue to improve the lives of so many people throughout the world. Hey guys, so I'm James, and thank you guys so much for tuning into my brand new channel, I'm All Ears. I'm super excited to start this project off. It is something that I have been working on for a while now, so really excited. And in this video, I'm actually going to be interviewing Miss Christy Vogel. So Miss Vogel is the president of a nonprofit that's called Sounding Joy Hearing Aid Giving, and basically what they do is they work to raise money to get hearing aids for children who with hearing loss who can't afford it. So super cool mission. I'm super excited, and me and Miss Vogel are just going to be diving straight off the deep end. We're going to be talking about her story and a lot of the work that she does and the nonprofit does. So I'm super excited again for you guys to watch this. It is super interesting. And since this interview is around 45 minutes long, I am going to split it up into 2 separate parts. And I'm going to leave a link for the second part in the description below. So yeah, thank you guys so much again and enjoy. Okay, awesome. So, and with that, I am joined currently by Miss Christy Vogel. So a little bit of background on her. She is the CEO and founder at Marketing Direction Outsourced Marketing Experts, as well as the president of Sounding Joy Hearing Aid Giving, which is basically a nonprofit group or organization whose mission is, and this is a direct quote from their website, focused on providing hearing aids to children whose families can't afford them so they can reach their full potential in their education, their careers, their relationships, and their lives. She was also a speaker on a TEDx episode where she describes her history with hearing aids and why she decided to start her own nonprofit focused on it. And I will leave a link to that video in the description below for anyone interested in checking it out. So awesome. Christy, thank you so much for joining me. And how are you doing today?
I am awesome, James. I'm so excited to be on your podcast and to be talking about audiology and hearing aids and life-changing experiences. So I'm really excited to be on. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I just pretty much have a bunch of questions that we can just use as a sort of guide to guide along our conversation.
Awesome.
So first up, so you've lived with hearing loss and later got hearing aids for most of your life. And I was just wondering if you could give me and the viewers a little bit of background on your story and how hearing aids have affected your life. And then along with that, like just overall, how did you feel when you first got the hearing aids and what was kind of like going on inside your head? So like all of this stuff, how exactly did you feel? I want to hear it all.
That's a lot of questions, James. So you might have to remind me on those last couple. But my background is that I didn't even know I was hearing impaired until the 6th grade when they were doing a school-wide hearing test in the library, and I failed the test miserably. And unfortunately, the teacher just thought I was screwing around and sent me to the back of the line just to go through the whole process again. And as you can imagine, was pretty mortifying. So it was then that they realized that I was hearing impaired, and I was sent to a specialist. And the specialist realized that, number one, I taught myself to read lips because I was probably hearing impaired since birth. So that's what I did in order to cope and to be able to communicate. Didn't even realize I taught myself to read lips. And that secondly, I was in fact hearing impaired and I needed hearing aids. So when you're 11 years old, you don't want to be different. You want to kind of fit into the crowd. So I wasn't happy about needing hearing aids. And of course, they're very expensive. They're expensive then, they're expensive now. They're about $6,000 a pair for hearing aids, and unfortunately, insurance rarely covers that. So insurance didn't cover it back then. And so my family couldn't afford my hearing aids. We were a middle income family, but something that is that expensive, especially when there are other kids in the household, and I have 3 brothers, that's just not an expense that we could meet. So I went without my hearing aids. And for a number of years, I actually didn't get my hearing aids until my late 20s. So I went through school, through college, and my early career without hearing aids and not really knowing what I was missing out on until I got those hearing aids in my ears and said, oh my gosh. I didn't know that these buttons made a beeping noise. I didn't know that when things back up, they make a beeping noise because I couldn't hear that high frequency. So I thought that the audiologist back in the 6th grade was just overreacting and trying to sell a pair of hearing aids. And she was absolutely right. And, it's amazing with that. I hear that story all the time that parents are told that their child is hearing impaired, and the parents take it upon themselves because of lack of awareness that their child is fine. Oh, my child's fine. They hear me when we call them for dinner, or they're just aloof, or they just don't listen. They're kids. They don't listen. Right. And it struck me the other day that if, God forbid, the doctor told you that your child had cancer, would you try to diagnose that yourself as a parent and say, well, no, my child doesn't have cancer. My child still runs and plays and feels just fine, but they don't know what's going on inside of their bodies. So it's the same thing with hearing impairment. You can't be diagnosing things yourself that you have really little to no knowledge about, and certainly no training on, when a doctor is telling you that this has happened and this is what is needed for your child. So it's just an interesting perspective that we are hearing more and more about. So because of this experience that I went through, I always thought it would be a great idea to figure out a way to get people hearing aids, because they're so difficult to get and they're so expensive. And again, insurance doesn't cover them. And I always thought, I run a marketing company, as you mentioned, and I thought, maybe one day after I sell the marketing company, or when I retire, maybe I'll start a little nonprofit, or I'll do some fundraising to get kids hearing aids. Well, we started doing just early research on that and found some very startling statistics. One was children who don't get their hearing aids are more than twice as likely to become addicted to drugs and alcohol. The second one was children who don't get their hearing aids are more than 5.5 times as likely to attempt suicide. So it was then, wow. And so it was then that I said, my gosh, this isn't a nice to have kind of thing that I'm going to do in the future anymore. Children are dying. Yeah. And we need to save them. We need to help them to hear so that they don't feel isolated, they don't turn to drugs and alcohol, and they don't attempt to take their lives. And then when I put together the fact that I have 2 cousins, so I have nerve deafness. So a lot of my family members are hearing impaired. Okay. It's hereditary. Yeah. So 2 of my cousins were also hearing impaired and did not get their hearing aids, and they both died from their addictions. Wow. So when I found out this information and then finally connected it with the deaths of my cousins through their addictions, I said, okay, this has to happen. This has to start today. Yeah. My challenge became my purpose, became my mission, became my passion. Yeah. To get children hearing aids to save their lives. And that's what brought me to creating Sounding Joy, getting our 501c3, and we're buying kids hearing aids.
Yeah, well, I just thank you so much for all of that. That was super interesting. Definitely a lot to unpack there. But super interesting, really great story. Like I, for one, just think like after sharing all of those statistics, like I didn't even realize so much of that was like possible with like children. And that just like that sort of adds on to the reason why like I wanted to start a podcast like this too, because I'm realizing more and more that this is an issue that a lot of people just aren't educated about. Just a lot of parents, especially, or like just people in general, just don't know much about, or even people who might have hearing loss and not even realize it.
You're
And so,
absolutely right. You're
yeah.
absolutely James. What amazed me was that we work with school audiologists. Some of our school audiologists and some of the ENTs that we partner with did not know this information. They didn't
Really?
know that they are saving children's lives and what it is that they're doing. And
Really?
so part of that, our mission is spreading awareness, and
Yeah.
podcasts like yours, and thank you again for having me on. That's the way to spread that awareness, because
Yeah.
people don't know. I talk to people every day who say, I had no idea. I mean,
Yeah.
I was born hearing impaired. I had no idea.
Yeah, I was also born hearing impaired, and I had no idea. And I didn't even realize, like, until I got my hearing aids, how much of just a huge impact it's made on my life as well. So I completely agree. It is a life-changing thing that has the power to change so many lives for the better. And yet it's crazy just because so many people in the world don't even know about this, and just how much of like an impact hearing loss can have on like a lot of people's lives. So, and there's a lot that goes into that too, of course, but I think that's awesome that you decided to also like not only realize all that, but turn something that like was kind of like you were born with and like maybe a struggle you used to have, but turn that into like a passion and a purpose. I think that's super cool, really remarkable, and it just says a lot about who you are as a person. So yeah, all of
Thank you,
this is
James.
super important. Awesome. So yeah, I know you talked a lot about Sounding Joy and how hearing aids kind of, or that all led to you creating Sounding Joy. And so I was also wondering, you also kind of talked about like just in general about like why it's important for like children who are eligible, and like a lot of the statistics that go along with that. But I was also wondering, like, have you learned any other like just shocking pieces of information or statistics when you've been just working more with like hearing aid outreach, or like how has this like overall just made you feel when you like talk to people?
So some other information that people may not know about children and hearing aids is I already mentioned that they're rarely covered by insurance.
Yeah.
So Medicaid families do get their hearing aids covered. However, there have been changes in Medicaid lately where thousands and thousands of families are now losing their benefits. So that's a whole nother group of individuals who used to have that coverage, who no longer have that coverage. And also when we were looking at, well, who is in financial need for the hearing aids? Because as much as we would like to give to everyone who needs a hearing aid, we need to make sure that we're focusing on those individuals, those families who truly cannot afford hearing aids for their children. And so when you first start looking at it, is that the lower income? Is that middle income? What is that cutoff? Well, when usually you would look at poverty levels, well, a lot of them fall into the Medicaid bucket. But so certainly lower income, but we are looking at middle income families who still have that need. And I say this all the time. I work, I'm a CEO of a marketing company where our clients are all CEOs of their own respective companies, and they're successful people. But if I ask them to write a check for $6,000 today, that's a tall ask, even if it's for your child. And as I mentioned before, even with especially if you have multiple children with multiple needs. Yeah. So we gifted hearing aids to a family a couple of months ago who have two children who are hearing impaired. They have nerve deafness
wow.
like I do.
Yeah.
So siblings, an 8-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
Their father has nerve deafness, so he has his hearing aids. He already had his, but they've got 2 children that need hearing aids. So that's boom, $12,000 right
Yeah.
off the bat. Right off the bat. So
Wow.
can the average family afford to write a check for $12,000? No, they absolutely can't. So we took a real serious look at what income level are we looking at. We're still refining it, but right now we're looking at about 400% above the poverty level, which
Okay.
is from what I understand, statewide organizations take a look at as well. And
Gotcha.
so that doesn't mean people above that can afford it, but you got, again, we would love to give it to everyone, but
Yeah,
we've got
yeah.
to cut it off at some point. So it's creating a real impact out there for those families who figure, well, we're a dual income family and we're not going to get any kind of assistance because we are working and we may be middle class income, but now there is help for them and their children are going to get hearing aids.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so it sounds like learning about hearing loss and people who like realize that they do need hearing aids, like all of that is just the start of a number of different obstacles that unfortunately a lot of different families everywhere have to realize and have to deal with. It's so much more than just like being born with hearing loss. A lot of people, have financial issues and struggle with it. Yeah, I am very fortunate and privileged enough to have the opportunity to get hearing aids at like
Yay.
such a young age. So I am incredibly grateful and incredibly lucky for that. But I can't even imagine some people who, unfortunately, some of them might not for a very, very long time, or if ever, be able to get hearing aids and live most or a lot of their lives just hearing impaired with no real solution, unfortunately, just because of like lack of just finances maybe, or like education. And this is a real thing. And yeah, not enough people just seem to know about it for a number of reasons. So it's definitely
Right.
a lot to take in. And there's a lot more to learn about than just like the first part.
Right, exactly. And something else that that I've learned about recently that we didn't originally anticipate is because the whole idea was, all right, children are dying, they need their hearing aids, let's get them hearing aids. So now
Yeah.
we're fundraising and people are so giving, we're so blessed. And so we're buying hearing aids. But there are hurdles, just like you said. There are hurdles to the knowledge of the parents that I mentioned previously. The parents think my child's fine. Thank you very much, but my child is fine, and then they truly believe that, and it doesn't make them bad parents, but it goes back to the knowledge and the education.
Yeah,
of
definitely.
when you have a medical professional making a recommendation and identifying an issue or a challenge that your child is having, that at least listen and consider it and dive into that a little bit more. But a lot of these parents that we're working with and our school audiologists are working with, because we work directly with the school audiologist, is they've got multiple children. Some of these parents are working 2 and 3 jobs, single parent homes. And so there's just not time to dedicate to getting their child to the doctor. For first, they have to get them to a regular medical doctor to sign a waiver to say, yes, your child can benefit from hearing aids, because you don't know if they're not hearing well. Is it because, God forbid, it's a tumor that's sitting on their cochlea? Well, a hearing aid is not going to help that. So you have to have a preliminary meeting with a doctor that says, yes, a hearing aid is going to help them. And then another appointment with the audiologist or the ENT to assess and decide what type of hearing aid is best for you, because there are there are thousands of different levels of technology for
Yeah.
hearing aids.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
so,
even realize there's so many different, there's such a big variety. When I
Right.
first got my hearing aids, like I was learning, just doing more research on it, and there's so many different levels depending on how much money each one is and what might fit your own individual needs. So, like, the diagnosis is just like the start.
Right, exactly. I mean, I keep using the cancer example, which may seem extreme, but when the doctor says you have cancer, do you go out and choose your own chemo? Of course not.
Yeah.
Listen, the doctor knows what type of chemo is going to be best for your type of cancer and how often to give it and how much to give. And so it's the same thing with the hearing aids, which is kind of what drives me crazy with the adult over-the-counter hearing aids, which, by the way, those are only for the over-the-counter hearing aids are only for adults and not for children.
Right.
And so in some cases, we're hearing that the parents with, unable to afford their children's hearing aids are buying adult size hearing aids and trying to fit them in the ears of their child,
Really?
therefore creating more damage and more hearing loss. So it's just, again, it's lack of educating people being educated that these are for adults and not for children, and that they need to be seen by a specialist to recommend based on their level of hearing loss and their type of hearing loss. Do they need one hearing aid? Do they need two hearing aids?
Yeah.
What technology level do they need? If it's just mild hearing loss, it's going to be a less expensive hearing aid. If they have severe hearing loss, it's going to be more expensive hearing aid. Are they at the age where they are have a smartphone? Well, then they need that Bluetooth technology, or maybe they don't at that point in time. So you really need, just like with any medical diagnosis, you need that medical professional to be able to assess the situation and then make the recommendation that's best for your family, for your child.
Yeah, because it sounds like, again, like all of these parents and family members and loved ones, they all have the best intentions, but unfortunately, just the way everything has been set up, and just lack of education and understanding, it can sometimes create even more problems, which of course no one wants to have happen. But it's just the unfortunate, just reality of the situation. So yeah, I completely agree. It's all, very unfortunate, and there's a lot to, look at with that. And then just on top of that, I mean, you have like your own nonprofit, so you have a lot of people like donating money and like giving a lot of stuff to help all these people. But have you felt, or like have you noticed any like good ways for people with good hearing to maybe better understand this issue, or maybe like personalize it in some way when you've like talked to maybe people with good hearing? Have you figure out ways maybe to compare it just for like people who might have really good hearing and might just not understand it as well, or think of it as maybe that important of an issue just because it's not as personal?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it is, if you're not having the experience yourself, how do you can have empathy, but how do you really understand what a person who is hearing impaired is going through, or how they do hear? And one of the examples that I use is everybody's got their AirPods nowadays. And so put your AirPods in, turn off the music, and actually in some cases, keep the music on and maybe have some white noise in there, and then try to have a conversation. So if you're not looking at the person and they're talking behind you, and you've got this static going on in your ears, and your ears are somewhat plugged, you're probably going to hear, and this is based on my hearing impairment. I'm at the severe level, but someone with even less hearing than I do, their experience is going to be completely different. So I'm just describing it based on mine. But if you've got somebody behind you, you don't know what they're saying. You hear that somebody's saying something, but it's probably muffled. So you have no idea if they're talking to you, and if they are talking to you, what are they saying to you? So that's the way that I get people. Once they do that, they're going, oh, I get it. I get it. Because in that example, I'm saying, well, I can hear you, but I just don't know what you're saying. And people don't understand that. Well, if you can hear me, why don't you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Well, because it's muffled. And the reason it's muffled is, again, if they're standing behind you, I can't understand what you're saying because I do read lips. So like the audiologist said, I taught myself to read lips.
Yeah, which is super impressive. And I'm sure, unfortunately, a lot of other children and people have like forced themselves or had to teach themselves how to read lips just because of the situation they were in.
Right. What's interesting with COVID and those pesky masks that I understand were needed, but it made it really difficult. I mean, I was just a cranky person during COVID. I think we all were, but it was just so hard to communicate. And you tell people, I read lips, can you please speak up? And they do the first 2 or 3 words, and then they go, but they're uncomfortable talking so loud. So I understand that. So I would just have to ask people to repeat themselves, and they get frustrated with me for that. So it was really difficult. But what was really interesting is that people I knew who have their hearing is fine were saying that they were having a harder time hearing. And I said, well, you rely on the facial cues, so reading lips and looking at the jaw movements and that kind of thing. You rely on that in order to communicate as well. And that was taken away from you with the mask. So you were also technically reading lips as well. And it's so many people mention that to me because they know that I read lips. So I just found that it was kind of an interesting experiment. I don't want to go through the experiment again, but
definitely not.
It was an interesting experiment with people who do hear and giving them a sample of what it's like for you and I on a daily basis to not be able to hear as clearly as everyone else.
I definitely remember during COVID, I used to like work at just like a little pretzel shop, and customers would come in with their masks, and I would just have the hardest time trying to understand them. And I'd have to constantly speak up, and then sometimes they just get frustrated with it, and then I'd be frustrated just because I like just could never hear them or understand what they were saying. And it was always just like a struggle just to try and like understand and make sure I could pick up on everything. That along with just like other conversations I would just have with people like before I got hearing aids. I remember it would just be like very hard sometimes, and it would just make some conversations like very awkward, or I'd just miss out on a lot of things that like I wouldn't ever really get to find out until later. And then getting my hearing aids, I just realized like it was just so much like it just took a lot less effort and just to engage with people and really like understand and like pick up everything they were saying. And so like again, completely changed like just the way I like thought of my interactions with people too, which is super important.
Right.
Especially for children too. Like children, they always want to fit in and feel included. So like I can imagine that as well.
Right. And what you just described, James, is the initial, the foundational pathway to isolation, which is where the addiction comes in, which is where the suicide attempts come in. So you were saying that, it's frustrating and it's exhausting to try to hear the entire conversation. So you try, and then as time progresses, you start leaning back and not even trying anymore because it is so tiring, and you're tired of asking people to repeat themselves. And quite frankly, though they know and love us, they get tired of us asking them to repeat themselves. And so you're not as engaged as you once were. And it's just a slow, sad progression to no longer being a part of the conversations. And people speak to you less and include you in the conversations less, because it's easier just to leave you out of those conversations. Not a mean bone in anyone's body by doing this. It's just a natural progression because we start pulling back. And that, my friend, is the beginning of the isolation that eventually kills.
Yeah, and we definitely don't want like anyone to experience that, and especially children who always want to feel fitted and included. So yeah,
Right.
very
Exactly.
unfortunate, and it's really important, obviously, to like have more people just be made aware of stuff like this because again, you were saying no one is doing this intentionally. There's not a mean bone in people's body just because they're doing this. It's just what happens naturally. Just because a lot of people just don't understand or just haven't really thought about it as much, which is just very unfortunate. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Right. They think that's just Christy. That's just James. That's just the way they are.
right, yeah, yeah. When it could be like couldn't be further from the truth.